I'm Sophia Williams, and at the age of 28, I was only 3 days away from getting married to Ethan Blackwood, the man of my dreams. Before his affluent parents surprised me with a prenuptial agreement and an ultimatum, everything seemed ideal. The wedding is off if you don't sign it. They had no idea that underneath my humble exterior was $9 million, a thriving software business, and the will to persevere. The one thing they respected was going to confront their arrogant faces. Cash. Tell me where you are viewing from in the comments section. If you appreciate reading about underdogs who overcome adversity, then press the like button and subscribe to follow along as I share how I clean their arrogant smiles. My parents taught high school and instilled in me the ideals of hard work and knowledge while I was growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Chicago. We were never rich, but we were comfortable. Through several late nights and flawless marks, I was able to win scholarships that covered every bit of my college expenses. After earning an honors degree in computer science from Northwestern, I jumped right into the IT industry, determined to make my own way. When my grandfather died during my senior year, he was my biggest supporter. I received an unexpected bequest from him. I inherited a $7 million inheritance from his modest lifestyle, which had been hidden by wise investments over decades. I utilized a tiny amount to finance my tech firm, which focuses on educational software, and invested the most of it. My company's valuation increased my net worth by another $2 million at the age of 26. But judging by me, nobody would have suspected it. I drove a sensible automobile, had a good but modest apartment, and dressed nicely but not ostentatious. My goal was to succeed or fail based on my own abilities, rather than my financial situation. The only people who knew about my fortune were my parents, my financial advisors, and my best friend Jenna. Ethan and I first met at a charity banquet that supported educational initiatives for youngsters from disadvantaged backgrounds. I went there to represent the software that my employer had contributed. The Blackwoods were usually present at significant social events, which is why Ethan was there. His tall stature and warm brown eyes made him stand out right away, but so did the fact that he was genuinely interested in the cause in contrast to the other trust fund attendees. That evening, we spoke about everything from our mutual appreciation of spicy Thai food to our favorite hiking routes to the disparity in educational opportunities. I immediately gave him my number when he asked for it. Even though he was aware of his family's identity, the Blackwoods were old-money Chicagoans with ancestry dating back to the early timber barons. Half of the corporate power players in the Midwest were represented by their legal firm, Blackwood & Associates. Ethan brought handmade sandwiches to our picnic in Millennium Park on our first date, and he acknowledged that he had researched my business online and was impressed by my work. Ethan was that person. Everywhere. Detailed but sincere. After that weekend of hiking, cooking mishaps in my kitchen, cerebral arguments that occasionally lasted until dawn, and a strong physical bond that overcame all else, we were inseparable. I never showed off my money, and he never showed off his. Given what we were creating together, it didn't seem significant. He cherished that. I was self-reliant and had a strong work ethic. I admired that he had cultivated a sense of justice and fairness that informed his law work in spite of his affluent upbringing. I saw the first signs of problems when 6 months later he brought me home to meet his parents. With well-kept grounds and a home big enough to accommodate 8 families, the Blackwood estate was a huge property in the most exclusive area of Lake Forest. Victoria Blackwood and Richard Blackwood were kind but sardonic in their evaluation. Victoria in particular had a way of posing seemingly innocent inquiries that were obviously intended to prove my lineage or lack thereof. She told me during dinner that Northwestern is a good school. Your parents are both teachers. Did you find the scholarship program to be comprehensive? How admirable. Such a vital career, but I assume the financial limitations must have been difficult. Ethan either decided to ignore these subtle jabs or failed to perceive them. Being the youngest of 3 kids, he was obviously used to navigating his mother with ease. His father was disdainful but more straightforward. I was essentially left out of the conversation as they talked mostly to Ethan about individuals and things I didn't know anything about. Even yet, these were small annoyances in comparison to the happiness Ethan gave me when he proposed to me on a sunset sail on Lake Michigan on our 2nd anniversary. Without hesitation, I answered sure. His grandmother owned the elegant emerald ring, which was the ideal fit for my hand. Planning a wedding started off as a fantasy, but gradually exposed more cracks in the framework. Even though Victoria never addressed money directly, there was always the implicit belief that the Blackwoods would take care of everything, because it was obvious that I couldn't afford the wedding that was appropriate for their son. Victoria had ideas about everything from the location to the flowers. Instead, rectify this misconception. I gave them permission to believe what they desired. My pride kept me from seeming to compete with them financially, and I had good cause to keep my financial circumstances quiet. Ethan made an effort to mediate at times, gently suggesting that I make concessions, and at other times holding strong on issues that were important to me. Since most of the specifics seemed insignificant in comparison to the fact that I would be marrying the guy I loved, I usually did. When Victoria demanded that the guest list include 50 of their family friends, when she chose a 7-tiered behemoth from a posh bakery and rejected my wedding cake selection as charming, I nodded. I gave it up. My clothing was the only thing I demanded. A sleek, contemporary style that gave me a sense of confidence and beauty. Even so, Victoria was able to imply that I had picked it, not because it was a wonderful fit for me, but rather because it was affordable. I started to feel more and more like a guest at my own engagement as the wedding drew near. However, I comforted myself by knowing that Ethan and I would create our own life apart from his family's everyday influence when we were married. Instead of living in the Blackwood family area, he had previously agreed that we would live in the condo we had selected jointly downtown near both of our places of employment. Just as his mom had said, the wedding is 3 days away. It was all coming together at last. The location was ready. The arrangement of the flowers, the catering was completed. Victoria called to invite me to tea soon after I had finalized the plans with the photographer. That afternoon, she stated that Ethan would be in meetings all day and that she believed it would be good to have someone accompany him. Before the wedding celebrations started once. In hindsight, I should have noticed the predatory sweetness in her voice, but I was functioning on little sleep and a lot of stress, so all I could think about was the chance to possibly finally get to know my future mother-in-law. I had no clue that I was entering a situation that would put not only my patience to the test, but also the basis of my relationship with Ethan and his family at stake. In the bright light of that Wednesday afternoon, the Blackwood estate appeared even more formidable. The circular driveway was well kept and the stone facade shone in the sunlight. Every stone is in its proper place. Richard's Mercedes was parked in the driveway when I came up in my little Audi. That was not what was expected. Victoria had made no mention of his attending our tea. Instead of taking tea in the sunroom as Victoria always did, the housekeeper Marta greeted the door with her usual reticent grin and showed me to the formal sitting room. Another red flag that I didn't notice at the time. Richard and Victoria had already taken their seats, both dressed as though they were attending a business meeting rather than a relaxed family get-together. Richard was wearing one of his signature charcoal gray power suits replete with cufflinks with the Blackwood family crest, and Victoria was dressed in a fitted blue suit that likely cost more than most people's monthly rent. "I appreciate you coming at such short notice, Sophia, my darling." With a smile that stopped short of her eyes, Victoria spoke. "Have a seat, please." As I sat across from them, I had the unexpected impression that I was at a job interview instead of a family get-together. There was still no tea service on the coffee table between us. Before the wedding, we felt it was necessary to talk about a few things. Richard didn't introduce himself. Business issues that need to be resolved in advance to guarantee a seamless transition later on. Victoria gave a nod. Clear expectations and agreements are the cornerstone of any successful marriage. My stomach grew constricted. What sort of contracts, I inquired, but I could already see where this was going. Richard grabbed a big booklet with a blue cover from a leather portfolio cushion next to him. He slid it in my direction across the coffee table. Our family lawyer has created this typical prenuptial agreement. Describes how family assets are safeguarded and what would happen in the unusual event that your marriage to Ethan fails. I didn't grab the document right away. I responded cautiously, "This is the first time I've heard of a prenuptial agreement. I've never talked about this with Ethan." Victoria seamlessly interfered, and Ethan saw the urgency. Significant assets owned by the Blackwood family have been safeguarded for many generations. All spouses entering the household must fulfill this simple requirement. I had serious doubts about that. A woman from a financial family had been married to Ethan's older brother. The Blackwoods would hardly require financial protection from this person. Additionally, his sister had wed her college love, a senator's son who had a sizable trust fund of his own. At last, I grabbed the paper and started scanning its pages. I had worked on enough contracts as a tech entrepreneur to see right away that this was not a fair bargain. It basically said that I would leave with almost nothing in the case of a divorce. No matter how long we stay married or how much I contribute to our lives together, Ethan would own any property gained during the marriage, and there were provisions pertaining to intellectual property that would have an effect on my company. I tried to seem objective as I added, "This seems very one-sided." Richard dismissively waved his hand. "It is common terminology used to safeguard existing family fortune. Sophia, you have to realize that the Blackwood assets are more than simply cash. They are a generation-old heritage." What about my possessions? I inquired. Intellectual property and my business. Victoria laughed a little, which made me tense. Yes, your educational software business is nice, but we're talking about a lot of money and real estate. It's a very different scale. They could clearly see the contempt in her tone. Being a nobody from a humble upbringing, I should be thankful for the chance to wed into their esteemed family. They laughed at the idea that I could have assets worth defending. Maybe you want us to include a note about your business. Richard made a wonderful offer, but to be honest, he would probably be giving regardless of any legal requirements if you and Ethan got divorced. Supporting underdogs has always been a special place for him. Heat sprang to my face, but I pushed myself to be calm. When is the deadline for signing this? I inquired. It would be best now. Pulling a Mont Blanc pen out of her jacket pocket, Victoria murmured. We would like this resolved well in advance of the wedding, which is in 3 days. I gently put the document down. This would need to be reviewed by my own attorney first. Richard's brows slightly lifted. Your own attorney, is that required? This was prepared by one of Chicago's top family lawyers, in the best interests of the Blackwood family. Of course, I answered. However, as you just mentioned, there's a chance that our interests aren't entirely in line with one another. The first crack of anger appeared on Victoria's otherwise flawless face. This is very normal, Sophia. These days, everyone signs these. It's just sensible, I said. Then you won't mind if I give you a day to have it reviewed by a professional. Victoria and Richard looked at each other. Richard forcefully stated, I'm afraid we have to insist on getting this resolved today. If these issues are neglected for too long, they may become problematic. Moreover, the wedding is really near. Are you implying that my signing this paper today without seeking legal counsel is essential to the wedding? I wanted to know exactly where they stood. So I asked. Victoria's smile came back as icy as Chicago's January. What we're trying to convey, sweetheart, is that there are some unavoidable requirements for anyone who marries into the Blackwood family. Ethan is aware of this. You'll understand, too, if you really love him. The wedding is off if you don't sign it, Richard said plainly. The bottom line is that we have made significant financial investments in this wedding, but in order to safeguard the interest of the family, we will call off it if needed. Between us, the ultimatum lingered. I glanced from Victoria's smugly certain smile to Richard's detached business countenance. To them, I was a nobody who had to decide between losing the guy I loved and humiliating myself with a canceled wedding, or giving away my rights since they were so sure of their authority in this circumstance. They thought I would give in right away. I gathered the prenuptial agreement and got to my feet. I'll have to talk to Ethan about this. Ethan knows where we stand, Victoria remarked sarcastically. He may have been hesitant to speak with you openly about it, but he is aware of his responsibilities to his family. More than everything else, they had said that hurt. My chest tightened at the thought that Ethan was aware of this ambush and had led it to occur. Still, I replied, holding the paper maybe a little too firmly. I'll have to talk to him before I decide anything. Richard stood up too, making a practice buttoning motion on his suit jacket. Sophia, you have till tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. We'll wait for your signature or for you to decide to call off the wedding. We really hope you will choose wisely. Without bothering to arise, Victoria continued. You are very important to Ethan. It would be unfortunate to cause him pain over a straightforward formality that keeps everyone safe. With a stiff nod, I turned to walk away from the prenup, which felt like a heavy weight in my hands. I was heading out to my car. From the sitting room's open window, I could hear Victoria's voice. She is going to sign. She couldn't find a match like Ethan anywhere else, not in whatever circles her parents hang out in at the community college. The last straw came when Richard responded with a quiet laugh. Before the tears began to pour, I got into my car, put the prenuptial agreement on the passenger seat, and drove past the elaborate gates of the Blackwood estate. It was a blur on the way home. As Chicago's affluent districts gave way to the more recognizable downtown scene, tears ran down my cheeks. Twice the tears obscured my vision of the road, forcing me to pull over. Ethan's name flashed on the screen as my phone rang 4 times, but I ignored it and left it on voicemail. I couldn't speak to him at a red light until I had had time to digest what had transpired. Like scenes from a movie I had somehow starred in without recognizing it, memories raced through my head. When I drove it to their house for the first time, Victoria remarked on my sensible automobile choice. Richard questioned me sharply about my business plan and then dismissed educational technology as a niche sector with no room for expansion. At the Christmas meal, Ethan's brother had inquired about my plans to continue running my little business, after marriage treating it more like a pastime than my calling. All of these instances had been disregarded or justified by me because I thought they were isolated incidences or miscommunications. Since I didn't have their lineage or imagined affluence, I now regarded them as a part of a trend that consistently undervalued me. I contacted the only person I knew who would be sympathetic when I finally arrived at my flat. "What did they do on the phone?" Jenna's voice raised in outrage. "The wedding is 3 days away. Sophie, that is so cheesy. It's blatantly manipulative." My best buddy from college, Jenna, had been my roommate. She was especially irritated by the Blackwoods' actions because she was well aware of my whole financial status. Curling up on my couch with the phone to my ear, I added, "The worst part is that apparently Ethan knew. He simply lacked the courage to tell me directly." Jenna warned, "You don't know that for sure." "His parents could be playing a bluff." I said, "In any case, it does not look good for him. Either he has no control over his connection with them, so they may threaten to call off his wedding without his knowledge, or he knew and allowed them to ambush me." Jenna was silent for a while regarding the prenuptial agreement. "What will you do? Have you already read it all?" "Enough to see that it is wholly biased. They even contain provisions that could impact my software company's intellectual property rights. Are you serious?" "That's ridiculous." Jenna was as indignant as I was. "You're aware of what you must do. Tomorrow morning, give Harold a call." My grandfather's lawyer, Harold Winters, was still in charge of my legal matters. He was astute, knowledgeable, and above all, wholly committed to safeguarding my interests. I said I would. I must speak with Ethan first, though. I must know his position in all of this. I eventually plucked up the confidence to give Ethan a call back after I hung up with Jenna. On the first ring, he answered, "Sophia, God be praised. Mom stated you were unhappy when you left. What took place?" I nearly faltered at his worried tone, but I was bolstered by the image of Victoria's arrogant expression. I explained carefully that your parents had surprised me with a prenuptial agreement and threatened to cancel the wedding unless I signed it by tomorrow morning. They also suggested that you knew exactly what this strategy was. The other end's silence was incriminating. I asked Ethan. I had no idea they would come up to you in that manner. At last he spoke in a strained tone. "I promised them that I would speak with you directly about it. Did you know about the prenuptial agreement? I acknowledged that my heart was sinking. Try to comprehend, Sophia. In my family, prenuptial agreements have been a part of every marriage for centuries. It's just the way things are. And until your folks cornered me, you didn't believe this was anything to bring up our wedding is 3 days away." He let out a deep sigh. "I was about to mention that. I knew it would annoy you, so I simply kept putting it off. And it was already stressful enough to organize a wedding. So you let your parents deal with it, as if I were a problem that needed to be handled." "That's unfair," Ethan said. "I was attempting to keep you safe. Defend me." I gave a sour laugh. "By giving me an ultimatum without warning from your folks. By permitting them to incorporate provisions that could have an impact on my company. Ethan, that's not protection. Cowardice is what that is." "You are overreacting," he remarked, adopting the conciliatory tone I had seen him employ when dealing with challenging customers. "It's really a typical legal paper. These days, everyone signs them." "Have you read it, really?" Another telling pause was questioned by me. "Not exactly," he said. "According to Dad, it was the usual family pattern which guarantees that, regardless of my contributions to the marriage or the length of our time together, I will receive nothing in a divorce. I provide an overview of the template that can grant your family ownership of the intellectual property created by my business." Ethan responded, "That can't be right," but his voice had a hint of doubt in it. "Dad wouldn't do it. Go ahead and read it." I recommended paragraph 3 in section 4. He must have been finding a duplicate of the document when I heard rustling on his end. After a time, he seemed worried and continued, "I need to examine this more closely. I wasn't prepared for some of this language to be so hostile. Your folks granted me till 9 in the morning. I reminded him to sign it tomorrow or the wedding will be canceled. How do you feel about that ultimatum?" "That was not the right thing for them to do." He spoke hastily. "Naturally, this is not a need for the wedding. Can't we figure it out, because this is a need that cannot be waived in order to marry into the Blackwood family, as your mother made very clear." Despite her passionate nature, Mom does not make these choices. "Yes, we do." Despite my want to believe him, skepticism had set in. "Then give them a call today. Inform them that we will deal with this after the wedding and that the ultimatum is off the table." "Sophia, be sensible. We can't ignore this completely. Given the situation, a prenuptial agreement seems reasonable. Under what conditions?" I pushed. "The fact that I probably don't have much money, but your family does." He hesitated. "It's more complicated than that. Family trusts exist. Commercial objectives. A simple teacher's daughter cannot comprehend the complexity of the situation." Echoing the contempt in Victoria's voice, I concluded for him, "I didn't intend to say that." "And you know it. Ethan responded, his tone full of fury. How come you're making this so hard? It's only a piece of paper that we should never have to use. Why is it worth threatening to call off our wedding if it's only a piece of paper? He didn't know how to respond to it. I need time to reflect. Finally, I said, and Ethan, you have to make up your mind. With me or with your parents? He objected, that's not a fair choice. They are my family, but I still adore you, and in 3 days, what should I be? Quietly, I asked. Unanswered, the question hovered between us. I said, I'll give you a call tomorrow, and hung up before he could answer. With the phone tightly gripped in my palm, I sat in the quiet of my flat, threatening tears once more. Something changed in me when I realized the prenup was still on my coffee table. A sense of sadness gave way to resolve. Maybe it was time for the Blackwoods to learn whether they intended to make this about power and money. I had both. I launched my financial portfolio on my laptop. With cautious investing, my grandfather's fortune had increased to $7.5 million. During our most recent investment round, my firm Edu Tech Solutions was valued at $1.5 million, increasing my total net worth to about $9 million. Perhaps not Blackwood money, but enough to completely alter the course of this discussion. I had kept my financial status a secret for 3 years, not because I was ashamed, but because I wanted to be adored for who I am, not how much money I make. I had seen how Ethan's riches and family name caused him to be treated differently by friends and acquaintances, and I didn't want that type of shallow attention. Furthermore, there were strategic benefits to going unnoticed in the IT industry. But now I had to decide whether to give up my rights or risk losing the man I cared about. I became aware that by keeping quiet, the Blackwoods had been able to create a completely untrue story about me. Although I was a prosperous entrepreneur who chose to live on an equal footing with their son, they perceived me as a gold digger who was above my station. A strategy started to take shape in my head as this revelation solidified. I refused to be intimidated or coerced. I wouldn't agree to their one-sided prenuptial agreement. However, I also wouldn't leave the man I loved without a struggle. Harold got a brief SMS from me. I have an important meeting tomorrow at 7 a.m. prenuptial agreement. 3 days till the wedding. We'll provide an explanation in person. He answered in a flash. At precisely 7, we will arrive at your office. Bring all of your paperwork. That night, I had a restless night. Cycling through uncertainty, rage, hurt, and resolve. But by dawn, one thing was evident. I could no longer hide my achievement. They would now have to face with the real Sophia Williams, not the humble schoolteacher's daughter they believed that they could intimidate after the Blackwoods forced this encounter. The following morning at 6:45 at my downtown office, I had already started going over the prenuptial agreement line by line and taking notes. I had purposefully dressed in a fitted charcoal gray suit that exuded confidence and authority, one of my power ensembles. I wore the pearl earrings my grandpa had given me for graduating from college, and my hair was tied back in a stylish ponytail. A reminder of my roots and the principles that have helped me succeed. Immaculate as ever, Harold showed up in his custom suit at exactly 7 o'clock. His silver hair was neatly combed as he carried his battered leather briefcase, which had been used for decades of court cases. Even at 72, he remained one of Chicago's most astute lawyers, known for his unwavering ethics and brutal effectiveness. Sophia, good morning. Placing his briefcase on my conference table, he welcomed me. I must admit that I was taken aback when I got your SMS. Because there wasn't a prenuptial agreement until yesterday, you never brought it up in our prior wedding conversations. 3 days before to the wedding, I gave him the papers and explained. I was confronted by my prospective in-laws with this document and a deadline of 9 a.m. to sign it. Today, or call off the wedding. Harold took the document, raising his bushy eyebrows. That timing seems a little unconventional. To put it mildly, I advised you to read it, especially Section 6 on asset division and 4 on intellectual property. He started scanning the page after donning his reading glasses. As he went along, his demeanor grew more solemn. After carefully reading for around 15 minutes. Putting it down, he took off his spectacles. He said bluntly, "In my 45 years of practice, this is one of the most aggressively one-sided prenuptial agreements I have seen. Additionally, I have witnessed several doozies, particularly in wealthy homes. Are you able to resist it?" I inquired. Harold's face slowly lit up with a smile. The sort of thing that has probably terrified opposing counsel for decades. "I won't merely fight it, my love. I'll destroy it and put something in its place that genuinely safeguards your significant interests." He took out a legal paper from his briefcase. "Let us know exactly where you stand. You presently have almost $9 million in net worth." "Right." It's not known to the Blackwoods that I nodded. I was very ignorant, I admitted. I have never disclosed my financial circumstances. The magnitude of it is only known to you, Jenna, and my parents. Harold's laugh was a deep rumbling sound that betrayed real laughter. For them, this is going to be a big revelation. He struck the legal pad with his pen. Should we just reject their requirements and let things work themselves out? Or do you wish to keep this connection going? I hesitated at the question. I loved Ethan in spite of everything. The power dynamics his family was attempting to create were the problem, not him specifically. Finally, I responded, I want to save it. But only if his family accepts that I am entering this marriage as an equal and if Ethan is prepared to support me as a real partner. Not as a charity case, even though I don't seem to have any ancestry, they are really kind and accepting. Excellent. Harold gave a nod. After that, we draft a counteroffer, which is a reasonable and well-balanced prenuptial agreement that gives each party equal protection during the following 2 hours. I was working on a new document with Harold. In the event of a divorce, he crafted wording that safeguarded both my assets and Ethan's agreed-upon equitable parameters for property partition. Most significantly, it provided unwavering defense for my commercial interests and intellectual property. As we finished the paper, Harold stated, "Now for the presentation strategy. Setting and timing will be important. When and where would you like this counteroffer to be delivered?" I gave this great thought. It is necessary to have 2 chats. I must first have a private conversation with Ethan. If all goes well, we will then have to show this to his parents jointly. I propose holding the family gathering in a neutral setting. Harold suggested a location that is sufficiently visible to deter severe reactions. However, it's private enough for a private conversation. The Lakeview Restaurant's private dining room. I concluded that while on neutral ground, it is enough upmarket to satisfy the Blackwoods' tastes. Great decision, Harold said. And for the supporting records. On my desk, I opened a folder. Here is my whole financial portfolio, which includes my company's most current value bank statements and investment accounts. Everything has been checked and updated. Last month, Harold nodded contentedly as he went over the papers. These will clearly show where you stand. Let's talk about your strategy with Ethan now. We worked on improving my approach to both interactions for an additional hour. By the time Harold departed at 10:30, I was ready and assured. I had a good strategy, a reasonable prenuptial agreement, and above all, the determination to defend my rights in the kind of relationship I desired. I gave Jenna another call to give her an update after Harold left. "So, this is what you're actually doing?" she inquired, after I gave the plan's explanation, disclosing your financial circumstances after keeping them confidential. I haven't seen another choice all these time. No, I said, if I want a marriage founded on equality and truth. What if Ethan is upset because you withheld this information from him? Jenna pushed. Have you thought about that? I had a lot. Then I answered, we'll have to figure it out together. But perhaps we are not as compatible as I initially believed if he is unable to see why I desired love for myself rather than my cash account. All right, Jenna said. I believe that you are managing this with remarkable poise for what it is worth. That prenup made me giggle, and I would have informed Victoria Blackwood just where to put it, letting go of some of the stress I had been holding. The day is far from over. I could yet reach that stage. I hung off the phone and texted Ethan. We must speak. At 1 p.m., meet me at Carluccio's. Only the 2 of us. He answered in a flash. I'll be there. I cherish you. A new surge of emotion was triggered by those 3 words. I still thought he meant them in spite of everything. Would love be sufficient to go through this storm on its own? Over the course of the following hour, I mentally and physically prepared myself. My hair looked smooth and professional when I got a blowout at the salon in my building. I next applied more makeup, choosing a sophisticated style that exuded confidence without coming off as threatening. The pearl earrings continued to serve as a kind of talisman, tying me to my heritage and the grandpa who had always supported me. I felt like a warrior going into battle by the time I departed to meet Ethan, equipped with the truth principle and 9 million reasons why I was greatly misjudged by the Blackwoods. We had spent our first anniversary at one of our favorite restaurants, Carluccio's, an elegant Italian establishment. The comfortable surroundings seemed appropriate for this discussion, serving as a memory of better days and the love that had gotten us to this point of marriage. I asked for a quiet corner table when I got there a few minutes early. The maitre d', who recognized us as frequent customers, showed me a quiet area toward the rear that was far from other diners and ideal for what would probably be a heated discussion. Ethan showed up at exactly 1 looking gaunt. His normally flawless look was a little disheveled with black bags under his eyes, and a little crooked tie indicating that he had slept just as poorly as I had. His face lit up with relief as he saw me. He sat into the seat opposite from me and muttered, "Sophia. I appreciate you meeting me. Ever since our call yesterday night, I have been quite anxious." Instead of looking for the Blackwood heir who had let his parents trap me, I looked closely at him, looking for clues of the man I had fallen in love with. I confess that I nearly didn't arrive. I'm in an untenable situation because of your folks. Across the table, he grabbed my hand. I apologize. I understand. After our conversation last night, I chatted with them. It didn't work out. I was interested in that. What took place, I informed them that their ultimatum was unacceptable and that I, not them, would be the one to call off the wedding because of it. There was a glimmer of optimism in my chest. What was their reaction? Ethan let out a deep sigh. Dad accused me of being passionate and naive. Mom sobbed and said that I had put an outsider above my family. They had been manipulating me throughout my life with the same tactic. Was it successful? I posed a direct question. He looked right into my eyes. The number. Not now. I informed them. I would personally call each and every wedding guest tonight and explain the precise reason the event was canceled, or they would revoke the ultimatum. I was proud of him in spite of everything. It must have been challenging. With a rueful smile, he confessed that it was both frightening and somehow freeing. I left that house for the first time in my life without giving in to their pressure. The server came over, and as neither of us was really hungry, we both ordered only drinks. Ethan went on, I stayed at Jason's place the night to try to figure out what to do next when we were alone again. Although the prenuptial agreement is not inherently irrational, the manner in which they handled it and several of the provisions I observed made me feel ashamed to be a Blackwood. I inhaled deeply. Now was the time to start showing my own reality. I have to tell you something essential, Ethan. I've concealed something from you all our time together. His face changed to one of worry. What is it? I started cautiously, and I'm not who your folks believe me to be. Or rather, they have underestimated me. His face twitched with confusion. What are you saying? I extracted a folder with printouts of my financial statements from my luggage. My grandfather gave me a sizable bequest when he passed away during my last year of college. The packet was moved across the table by me. As he perused the papers, Ethan's look changed from one of perplexity to astonishment. Incredulously, he read $7.5 million and your business. An additional $1.5 million. Here it is, Sophia. What kept you from telling me you don't identify yourself to everyone you meet as Ethan Blackwood of the Chicago Blackwoods for the same reason? I clarified. I wanted to be recognized for who I am rather than what I own. Instead of riches or prestige, I desired sincere connections built on respect for one another and a common set of ideals. He continued to examine the financial data, turning pages in increasing surprise. My folks have been treating you like a gold digger all this time. I finished for him after the Blackwood wealth. Isn't that ironic? Ethan's expression was a mixture of wonder and something more as he glanced up at me. Was there any harm? Did you not have enough faith in me to tell you this? I had been dreading that inquiry. But I had to be honest with him. Ethan, it was never about trust. It just didn't seem relevant at first. Then, as I got to know your family and saw how important riches and prestige were to them, I started to feel hesitant about telling. I honestly wanted to see how they would treat me as a test without knowing my financial condition, and I didn't want to be appreciated for my monetary account. A touch of defensiveness entered his voice as he asked. Not you, never of you, I hastily explained. However, in certain respects, it turned into a test of your family's moral fiber. Yesterday, they had a stunning failure. The arrival of our beverages offered a moment's relief from the ferocity of the discussion. Ethan took a large swig of his scotch once the server left and resumed his conversation. He spoke carefully and added, I understand your reasoning, but I can't help but feel that there was a lack of transparency between us. That is reciprocal. You ought to have informed me of your financial circumstances, and I ought to have explained the prenuptial expectations. He was correct, and I nodded in agreement. You're correct. This whole thing might have been averted with perfect honesty. However, we must choose our course now that we are here. What are you interested in doing? Under the words, I could hear the sincere inquiry he was asking. He wanted to know about us, not just the wedding or the prenuptial agreement. Our future. Harold and I had prepared a prenuptial agreement that morning, and I took out another folder with it. A marriage of equals is what I desire. I slipped it in his direction. I desire a relationship in which we both pledge to uphold the things we have created separately while working together to create something bigger. Additionally, I want in-laws that treat me as an equal partner rather than as a charity case. Their son was nobly saved from the obscurity of the middle class. Ethan started reading the updated prenuptial agreement after opening the folder. He instantly saw that the terms were more equitable than his parents' version because he is a lawyer himself. Looking up balancing protection for both parties, explicit conditions on intellectual property, equitable approaches to future profits and assets gained after marriage, he added, is completely appropriate. I said that's what a prenuptial agreement ought to be. It is a shield that provides equal protection to both sides, not a weapon. He grabbed my hand once more after closing the folder. I gave him permission to take it this time. What comes next then? Sincerely, I told him that depends on you. Ethan, I need to know where you stand. Not only about the prenuptial agreement, but also about our relationship and the part your family plays in it. I need to know that when we exchange vows in 3 days, we will genuinely unite as a team to confront the world, including your parents, together. When I left my parents' place last night, Ethan held my hand and kept his gaze fixed on mine. I made a decision. I choose us because it was the right thing to do, not because it was simple. Sophia, you are loved. I like your intelligence, moral character, and empathy. It makes no difference if you have $9 million or $9 million. Some of the ice that had accumulated around my heart was broken by the earnestness in his words. Then I added, this is what I suggest. This evening, we have a meeting with your parents. We jointly declare this new prenuptial agreement to be final. We explicitly state that our marriage would be an equal partnership and that the relationships between your family and us must reflect this. Ethan warned that they wouldn't take it well. In particular, my mom. I said probably not. However, we will learn all we need to know about the future of our connection with them from their response. Slowly, he nodded. You're correct. Boundaries that ought to have been established long ago need to be established now. In a little toast to confronting the Blackwood Inquisition, he lifted his glass. I clinked my glass against his as we did so. Together we drained our drinks and made plans for the confrontation that night. I sensed that my relationship with Ethan had returned. There were no longer any lies between us, neither his nor mine. We would now present a united front to his family with equality as our unassailable demand and honesty as our cornerstone. I quickly texted Harold to let her know that the first part of our strategy had worked. As usual, his answer was brief. Fantastic. Don't compromise on the essential terms, remember. I wish you luck. As Ethan and I walked out of the restaurant hand in hand, I thought, luck. It might not be required. Now the truth was on our side. And it, in my experience, was a much more potent weapon than any amount of luck. Our vehicle arrived at Lakeview Restaurant's door at exactly 6 o'clock in the evening. I had picked it with care, not only because it was a neutral area, but also because it was known as one of Chicago's most discreet upscale eateries. No matter how intense a business meeting became, the personnel was renowned for their professionalism and ability to act as though they didn't see or hear anything. Ethan's hand was warm and comforting against mine as he helped me out of the car. We had strengthened our unified front by examining the new prenuptial agreement and honing our strategy together during the afternoon. His well-tailored blue suit exuded power without coming off as intimidating. His dad's outfits were always in style. I had changed into a cream-colored dress that was both sophisticated and strong, and I wore my grandmother's pearls at my neck to match the earrings and a fitted jacket. Are you ready? We were standing in front of the restaurant's door when Ethan inquired. I squeezed his hand and responded, as ready as I will ever be. After introducing herself, the maitre d' showed us to the private dining area. I made a reservation. Although just 4 place settings had been set up, it was elegantly furnished with a 10-seater mahogany table. Tasteful, unique artwork was displayed on the walls, and the light from the exquisite chandelier above was reflected in crystal glasses. With the lake glistening in the early evening light, the expansive windows provided a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan. Your other visitors are still not here. We were notified by the maitre. While you wait, would you like some drinks? Each of us placed an order for sparkling water. Drinking would not help us in the impending conflict. When the maitre left, Ethan said, they'll be late. It's a move of power. Mom always makes guests wait at least 15 minutes before she gets someplace. He was absolutely correct. Richard Blackwood and Victoria Blackwood entered via the door at 6:17. Wearing a black suit that was almost exactly the same as the one he had worn during our prenuptial ambush, Richard was in his element. Victoria wore a deep burgundy, expensive dress adorned with diamond earrings that likely cost more than the monthly mortgage payments of most individuals. Every time she moved her head slightly, they caught the light. Ignoring me entirely, Victoria air-kissed her son's cheeks and whispered, "Ethan, darling." What a lovely location. However, I'm not really sure why a basic signature required this complex arrangement. I received a curt nod from Richard, the simple recognition of my presence. Sophia, I hope you have made a wise choice. 9 a.m. has come and gone, but considering the situation, we are prepared to be adaptable. Have a seat, please. I pointed to the chairs on the other side of the ones where Ethan and I were already sat. We have a lot to talk about. Victoria must have sensed from my tone that this would not be the straightforward surrender she had anticipated. She sat down, positioning herself with a refined poise, her eyes narrowing slightly. Your prenuptial agreement has been examined. I find it unacceptable in both its approach and its terms, Ethan said in a calm, businesslike manner. Richard raised his eyebrows. Not acceptable. It's the typical Blackwood family contract. The same paperwork were signed by your sister and your brother, not with this drama. They got married to persons from comparable backgrounds to ours. The power dynamics were completely different, as Ethan noted. Dynamics of power. Victoria waved her manicured palm dismissively as she repeated. Ethan, this isn't a social experiment. Any sensible family would insist on this basic legal protection. Our counterproposal and accompanying paperwork were visible when I opened my leather portfolio, which I had set on the table. We both believe that it is reasonable to have sensible legal protection. We have drafted a different prenuptial agreement that provides equal protection for both partners, I stated quietly. Richard's face grew serious. The setup wasn't that way. Instead of offering choices, you were supposed to sign our agreement. Plans are subject to change. I answered, looking him in the eye, particularly when fresh information becomes available. After bringing our sparkling water inside the server, took orders for drinks from Victoria and Richard. The tension that had built up over the table was not eased by the brief interlude, like a dense cloud. I passed the updated prenuptial agreement across the table once we were on our own again. Both the Blackwood family's assets and my own personal possessions are fairly and equitably protected by this contract. Victoria, your holdings couldn't help but smile patronizingly. Generations of Blackwood riches rarely need the same amount of security as your little software firm. Ethan smiled at me and remarked, You might be surprised, Ethan is... with a note of pride in his voice. I took out my portfolio's financial statements and layered them over the prenuptial agreement. I currently have about $9 million in net worth. Matter of fact, I said, $15 million in the form of my company's value from our most recent fundraising round and $75 million in varied assets from my grandfather's estate. They both looked shocked, and it was all I could have hoped for. Richard was the first to recover. His lawyer groped for the statements in scarcely disguised surprise, his mind rapidly readjusting. That isn't feasible. Victoria's cheeks flushed as she said, Your Audi is 5 years old. Both of your parents are educators. Financial prudence is more important to me than extravagant shows. I gave a fair response, and I did learn the value of education from my parents, living within one's means and working hard. Lessons that have been really helpful to me. Richard was looking over the papers with increasing alarm. These seem real, he conceded grudgingly. Why keep this a secret? If you had known, I said, would you have treated me differently? Victoria's face's growing blush was sufficient response. According to Richard, this drastically alters the equation. Lawyer mode is now completely activated. Before moving further, we would need to thoroughly examine any alternative arrangement. Naturally, I concurred. It's only fair. Victoria was still having trouble balancing her opinion of me with the financial realities in front of her, just as it would have been reasonable to give me some time to go over your original paperwork with my lawyer. You received $7 million from your grandfather. How did he do it? Over a lifetime of modest living, he made prudent investments. Like the first Blackwood who made your family's riches, I explained. I suppose. Victoria was obviously offended by the comparison. However, Ethan interrupted her before she could reply. Mom, Dad, the way this whole thing has been handled is the problem, not just the prenuptial agreement. 3 days prior to our wedding, it was improper and insulting to surprise Sophia with this. Richard claimed, but with much less conviction than previously, that we believed it best to settle it quickly by threatening to call off our wedding if she did not cooperate right away. Ethan disputed this. That is compulsion, not efficiency. Victoria changed strategies and went to her son. We only wanted to keep you and the family legacy safe, darling. You must realize that. Ethan firmly said, What I understand is that you try to use financial leverage to control our relationship after making assumptions about the woman I love without bothering to get to know her. That's over now. Seeing him resist the manipulation that had probably been used on him throughout his life made me love him more than I had ever loved him before. I diverted their focus to a new prenuptial agreement that safeguards my assets as well as those of Blackwood. Instead of just returning everything to its original ownership, it sets equitable rules for property, split in any future divorce depending on contribution and length of marriage. In addition, it has straightforward wording that safeguards both my economic interests and intellectual property rights just as it does the Blackwood families. Already, Richard was glancing over the paper with the attention to detail of a lawyer. He pointed out that some of these phrases are uncommon, but not in a condescending way. Ethan underlined that we need time to have our lawyers go over this, in contrast to the paper you showed Sophia. As he closed the folder, Richard murmured, "I said, you have till tomorrow afternoon. We need this settled before the wedding, which is in 2 days." Victoria's gaze snapped to me, unused to having deadlines imposed by others. "That is hardly sufficient time for proper legal review. It was sufficient time for me according to your original ultimatum," I reminded her. Richard placed a restraining hand on his wife's arm, recognizing the shift in leverage. "We will have our team review it first thing tomorrow morning and provide feedback by 3 p.m. Any proposed changes must maintain the fundamental balance of the agreement," Ethan stipulated. "This is not a negotiation to revert to one-sided terms." "Understood." Richard nodded. Businessman to businessman. Victoria had been uncharacteristically quiet, her eyes moving between me, Ethan, and the financial statements still on the table. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost some of its imperious quality. "I may have misjudged certain aspects of your situation, Sophia, though I still find it odd that you would conceal such information from your future family." It was as close to an apology as Victoria Blackwood was likely capable of offering. I decided to meet her halfway. "Perhaps we all could have communicated more openly from the beginning," I acknowledged. "Moving forward, I hope we can build a relationship based on mutual respect rather than assumptions." The waiter returned with Richard and Victoria's drinks and inquired about dinner. By unspoken agreement, we all declined this meeting, clearly having served its primary purpose. As we prepared to leave, Richard held out his hand to me, a gesture that would have been unthinkable 24 hours earlier. "You have proven yourself a formidable negotiator, Sophia. The Blackwood family may benefit from such unexpected perspectives." I accepted his handshake, recognizing it as a peace offering of sorts. "I look forward to contributing to the family in many ways, Mr. Blackwood." Victoria's farewell was less warm, but notably lacking the condescension that had characterized our previous interactions. Progress, if not perfection, once they had departed. Ethan pulled me into his arms right there in the private dining room. "You were magnificent," he whispered against my hair. "Absolutely magnificent. We were magnificent." I corrected him, leaning back to meet his eyes. Together, he smiled a genuine smile untainted by the stress of the past 2 days together. I liked the sound of that as we left the restaurant hand in hand under a sky. Turning to Twilight, I felt a profound sense of rightness settle over me. The road ahead would not be perfectly smooth, especially with Victoria as a mother-in-law, but the fundamental dynamics had shifted. We had established ourselves as equals both to each other and to his family. It was a foundation strong enough to build a marriage on. 2 days later, I stood in a small antechamber of the Drake Hotel wearing the sleek modern wedding dress I had chosen months ago. The prenuptial agreement had been signed yesterday afternoon, with only minor adjustments to the language that did not affect the balanced protection it provided both families. Richard had been surprisingly reasonable during the final negotiations, while Victoria had maintained a dignified distance from the process, perhaps still coming to terms with her misjudgment of the situation. Jenna adjusted my veil, her eyes suspiciously bright. "You look stunning, Sophie. And not just because of this amazing dress, there is something different about you today." "Confidence," my mother supplied from where she was arranging the train. My daughter finally stopped hiding her light. She was right. The past 3 days had transformed me in subtle but significant ways. Standing up to the Blackwoods, revealing my true financial situation, and establishing clear boundaries had lifted a weight I had not fully recognized was there. I had spent 3 years carefully managing perceptions, worried that my wealth would change how people saw me. The irony that this fear had led to exactly the type of judgment I had hoped to avoid was not lost on me. There was a soft knock at the door, and to my surprise, Victoria Blackwood entered. She had forgone her usual intimidating elegance for a softer, more maternal look in pale blue that complemented, rather than competed with my bridal ensemble. "May I have a moment alone with Sophia?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual imperious tone. My mother and Jenna exchanged glances before nodding and stepping out, leaving me face to face with my soon-to-be mother-in-law. Victoria approached slowly, taking in my appearance with an expression I could not quite read. "You make a beautiful bride," she said finally. "Thank you," I replied, uncertain where this conversation was heading. She fingered the delicate lace of my veil, a surprisingly vulnerable gesture from a woman who calculated her every move. "I owe you an apology, Sophia. A proper one, not the half-hearted acknowledgement I offered at the restaurant." That was unexpected. Victoria Blackwood did not strike me as someone familiar with apologies. My behavior was inexcusable, she continued. Not just the prenuptial agreement ambush, but the months of subtle condescension and judgment before that. I made assumptions based on superficial factors and never bothered to know the real woman. My son loves. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. That cannot have been easy to admit. I acknowledged a small, rueful smile touched her lips. The Blackwoods are not known for admitting mistakes. It is a family trait. I hope you and Ethan will improve upon in the next generation. She reached into her clutch and extracted a small velvet box. I brought you something. A peace offering of sorts. I accepted the box cautiously and opened it to find a pair of diamond and sapphire earrings that clearly had significant age and history. These belonged to Ethan's great-grandmother, Victoria explained. She was the daughter of a factory worker who married into the Blackwood family against considerable opposition. She went on to save the family business during the Depression, through sheer determination and business acumen that her husband lacked. The parallels were obvious, and I was touched by both the gesture and its symbolic meaning. They are beautiful, I said sincerely. Thank you for sharing this history with me. Perhaps you would consider wearing them today. Something old and something blue, as they say. I nodded, removing my pearl earrings and allowing Victoria to help me put on the sapphire ones. It was a small moment of connection, a tentative bridge across the chasm that had separated us. Ethan loves you deeply, she said as she stepped back to regard me. That should have been enough for me from the beginning. I hope you can forgive my failure to see that. I think we have both learned something about assumptions and appearances, I replied. Moving forward is what matters now. She nodded, composing herself with visible effort. Well, I should rejoin Richard. Your father will be here shortly to walk you down the aisle at the door. She paused. Welcome to the family, Sophia. Truly. After she left, I studied my reflection in the mirror, the sapphire earrings catching the light when I turned my head. They represented something important. A recognition that I was not just marrying Ethan, but joining a lineage of strong women who had shaped the Blackwood destiny in their own ways. My father arrived minutes later, his eyes growing misty when he saw me. My brilliant girl, he said, embracing me carefully to avoid disturbing my dress. Ready to start this new chapter, more than ready, I assured him. The ceremony was everything I had hoped for, intimate. Despite the 200 guests in attendance, when Ethan saw me walking down the aisle, the love shining in his eyes made everything else fade away. All the stress and conflict of the past week disappearing in the face of what truly mattered. Our vows were traditional, but spoken with a depth of meaning that moved many to tears, including, surprisingly, Victoria. At the reception, I noticed subtle shifts in how the Blackwood family and friends interacted with me. Gone was the condescension, replaced by genuine interest and respect. Richard introduced me to his business associates with pride, emphasizing my entrepreneurial success. Victoria made a point of seating me next to her oldest friend, a federal judge whose approval clearly mattered to her. Ethan noticed it too. Amazing what $9 million can do for one's social standing, he murmured in my ear as we shared our first dance. It is not about the money, I replied. It is about standing up for yourself and demanding respect. Perhaps a bit of both, he acknowledged with a smile. Either way, I have never been prouder to call you my wife. Our honeymoon in the Greek islands was a blissful escape from family dynamics and prenuptial negotiations. For 2 weeks, we were simply Ethan and Sophia, two people in love exploring whitewashed villages and crystal blue waters. We talked about the future, about building our life together as true partners, and about the boundaries we would maintain with both our families going forward. 6 months later, those conversations were put to the test. When Victoria began dropping hints about a Blackwood family tradition of Sunday dinners, and the expectation that we would attend weekly once a month, Ethan countered firmly when we discussed it privately. We need our own traditions and time together. I agreed, and to my surprise, Victoria accepted this boundary with minimal resistance, perhaps recognizing that the new dynamics between us were healthier for everyone. Richard showed his evolving respect in more practical ways. He invited me to consult on a technology upgrade for the family law firm and actually listened to my recommendations. When my company secured a major contract with the Chicago public school system, he sent a congratulatory note that was both professional and warm. Most significantly, Ethan and I established our own household rhythm independent of Blackwood expectations. We bought a home that we chose together in a neighborhood we both loved, using a combination of our resources. We made financial decisions as a team, each contributing our expertise, neither dominating the other. The prenuptial agreement that had caused such turmoil remained locked in a safe deposit box, hopefully never to be needed. Its true value had been in the process of creating it, in establishing that our marriage would be a partnership of equals, regardless of family name or net worth. As I reflect on that tumultuous week before our wedding, I am grateful for the crisis that forced us to confront issues that might otherwise have festered beneath the surface for years. Those 3 days of conflict and revelation strengthened our foundation in ways that smooth sailing never could have. I learned that hiding parts of yourself, even with the best intentions, can create more problems than it solves. Ethan learned to stand firm against family pressure when it threatened what truly mattered to him. Together, we discovered that true partnership requires both vulnerability and strength. The courage to reveal your whole self, and the fortitude to stand up for the relationship you want to build to the Blackwoods' wealth, had always been about power and status tools for controlling others and maintaining their position. They initially saw my perceived lack of wealth as a deficiency to be managed when they discovered my financial reality. They were forced to reevaluate not just their assessment of me, but their entire approach to family relationships. For me, wealth had always been about independence and opportunity, not power over others. That fundamental difference in perspective continues to shape my relationship with my in-laws, sometimes creating tension, but often leading to meaningful conversations about values and priorities. Marriage, I have discovered, is not just the union of two people, but the intersection of two life philosophies. Two approaches to everything from money to family to career ambitions. Finding harmony requires constant communication, mutual respect, and the willingness to stand firm on core principles while compromising on lesser matters. When faced with that prenuptial ultimatum 3 days before my wedding, I could have simply signed the document to avoid conflict. I could have walked away in anger and hurt. Instead, I chose the harder path of confrontation and truth, not just about my financial situation, but about the type of marriage and family relationship I was willing to accept. That choice set the tone for our marriage, and for my place within the Blackwood family. Not as an outsider to be managed, but as an equal contributor to be respected. It is a choice I would make again in a heartbeat. Have you ever had to stand your ground against people who underestimated you? Did you reveal your true worth and wipe those smug grins clean? Share your story in the comments below. And if this tale of turning the tables on those who misjudged you resonated with you, please like this video. Subscribe to my channel for more stories of triumph and transformation, and share with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be less than who you truly are.